Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, Mujebaleko, from wherever you're watching this show. A bit short notice, Nayenga, we're glad to be back and things will go back to how they were to some capacity. Zanji is coming back in full effect. Today we've come a little bit late, but Tujaku readjusting so that in the coming weeks, we come in our regular time where we come a little bit earlier. But I'm glad to be here. I'm happy that, we get to do this, run it back one more time and do it all over again. One of my favorite quotes is by, I've forgotten. Oh, yeah, it's by Dr. Colonel West. And he says, fail and fail better again and fail better again. So, one omuto was Omulangira used to tell us one omuto about ayiga, atambula nagwa nastuka, tambula nagwa nastuka. And then with time, you start to master your skill and you get some perfection to it. But perfection is never the goal because it doesn't exist, but satisfaction with what you're doing is all that matters. So I would like to thank Soph for the show, the show that's just come on. Your mind is the key to everything. When God created this world, we were crowned with a gift beyond every creation, and that's our minds. It's the key to the universe, the key to the unknown, the key to your emancipation, the key to your existence. So unlock your mind and the rest will follow. But I'm happy to be here. It's been a long time. We haven't done Zanji in a while. I just want to be grateful, to the powers that be, to the sky and the ground for holding us firm or holding me firm as well, me and you, the viewers, to this day that we can see, Zanji on air again. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about who killed Gaddafi, why Gaddafi was killed, and why it matters to us. Why should it be important that we know these things, that we understand these things, that we understand how the geo-global politics is playing out, not only for us as Ugandans or a Ugandan from Karamoja, from Buganda, from Busoga, but also as Africans. Because we're viewed as one, we're treated as one, and every time we are a threat to the norm. And the norm, by the way, it should be stated that the norm is set for our detriment. It's only when we rise up, when we challenge the norm, which we will continuously challenge over time until this empire is overthrown, because it is built not only on our backs, but on our suffering and on our minerals and on our exploitation, that then it has always been, how do we solve the African problem? That's what has built this empire that we live in today, of colonization, genocide, and a bunch of zombies like Museveni, Kagame, and the likes of them, who will bend their knees to the Western world. So today we're going to be talking about a Pan-Africanist who was painted as a dictator. The NATO stormed into Libya, destroying the country and leaving it depleted. And then we had mass media throwing a lot of propaganda to the world that he was a dictator that had to be dealt with. But then that story all sounds familiar when the West wants something. They raid into a nation, destroy it, kill its people, steal its resources, and say they were keeping world peace. So we want to look into today, why was Gaddafi attacked in this way? And if NATO is here to clean the world of dictators who have overstayed their power, why collaborate and work heavily with Museveni for this long? Because NATO is just a collection of Western countries who come together for their interests, for their military interests, but they call it a world safekeeping power. No one gave them the key to keep peace in the world. It's It's self-appointed power that they've given to themselves. So hopefully with today, we'll be able to see why this remains a threat not only to our emancipation, but a threat to the world and a threat to a stable world. And hopefully, Gaddafi's case can make a case for us to start to take our politics a bit more seriously. So, ngena banga tabikamu, this is why I like Zanji, because we can go in Lugangeleza and mix it all a bit. So, as I said in today's show, we're going to be talking about why was Gaddafi killed and by whom. So before I start today's show, I want us to see this picture. So this picture was taken after American militants arrived in Iraq. And if we all remember correctly, is that when they went to Iraq, there was massive propaganda that was spread not only in Iraq, every time they go somewhere, but specifically in Iraq, they were going to find weapons of mass destruction. But these are pictures of gold retrieved from Iraq after American troops from NATO arrived in Iraq. So I hope that this picture can sink into our minds and we can start to think about what weapons of mass destruction really mean and why that propaganda is created in that sort of way. So today we're going to strictly be looking at Gaddafi. So we want to break down a few timelines of events so that we really understand what went down and what happened. So in 2009, Gaddafi is the president of the African Union. We all know the African Union has rather become it's not fulfilled its capacity of what our ancestors fought for and hoped that it would be. It is yet to fulfill that capacity of a unionized, because African Union has existed for this long and still we do not have unionized a unionized currency. We still don't have borders are still a problem on the African continent. We need a visa to go everywhere on the African continent almost from each other. We still don't have a synchronized travel system. There's no even train that cuts from the north of Africa all the way to the south of Africa. So basically, when we start to look at what the African Union has done, if anyone can state anything in the comment box of what the African Union has done to further not only the politics, but the social and economic, for the social and economic benefit of the African people, then maybe then I'm wrong. Nayenga Mundabe Yange, the African Union has yet to fulfill its capacity. It hasn't fulfilled its capacity in that it has even become a tool to be used by this imperialist leader. Recently, Israel has been trying to get onto the African Union as an observer. Why should Israel, a country that is occupying another country, be on an observer in the African Union? A country that actually pushes for Western imperialism on the Middle Eastern front by further exploiting the Palestinian people, by spreading war and killing more Palestinian people. And we should understand that there are Afro-Palestinians in Palestine. This is rarely talked about. We African people exist almost everywhere, and there is generations and generations of Afro-Palestinian people who have been on the front lines to fight for the emancipation, the freeing, the liberation of Palestinian people from Israel. But then here you have an African Union trying to discuss and come to an agreement about Israel being part of the African Union. So it is yet to fill its capacity. So in 2009, Gaddafi was the president of the African Union, and he suggested that the states of the African continent, which is Africa, should switch to a new currency, independent of the American dollar. This currency would be called the gold dinar. So the objective for the new currency was to divert all the oil revenues, and we know how many African countries produce oil. I can try to list them. You have about on last week's show, if you saw it, we listed about 7 countries on the African continent producing just oil. You have Nigeria, you have Libya, you have Angola, Uganda produces oil. I've forgotten the rest off the top of my head. No, Mozambique, it might not be, Mozambique even has natural gas. So you have about 7 African nations producing oil. And you have also Tanzania. Is it Tanzania or Kenya? I'm sorry, I've forgotten which other nation. It might be Kenya, but no, Kenya refines. But you have about 7 at the minimum African countries producing oil. Oh, sorry, they have them listed here. So countries such as Nigeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Angola, you have Libya. So you have African countries producing oil. We have a lot of states producing oil. So the objective was that the new currency was to divert oil revenues towards state-controlled funds. These funds would be controlled away, would be driven away from being controlled by the American banks. In other words, the dollar would stop being used for the oil transactions. And we know with what's happening today with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, what the Russians have actually done, what they did, because Russia produces a lot of oil, what they did was to stop using the American dollar. And that's why also countries like Saudi Arabia, there has been a question about their alliance with the US, because they have also elected to stop using the American dollar as the form of currency to back the oil, and are looking into other currencies and other options. The Russians are selling the oil in their currency. So this is the global economy. For a long time, the American dollar is the currency behind oil exchange. And as we know, everything runs on energy. There is nothing in this world that does not run on energy. Even your body, down to your microcosmic being, you run on a certain form of energy. So when it comes to everything we use outside, it runs on energy. So what the Americans did to set the new face of imperialism, they made sure that the American dollar would be behind oil transactions. That's already owning the global currency. So here comes Gaddafi saying we need to take away our oil being managed by the American dollar, and we need to replace that with our money. So then that starts to really disturb some people. That starts to, as we know, Africa is full of traders. Let's start to actually not only acknowledge, but also be vigilant and ready to fight the enemy within. Because that is what lays in between us and our freedom. It's the cultivated enemy within, the greedy people, the neagalizanzeka, the ebyange byange, the nze kastanze ne family yange tuli bulungi. We have a lot of people of that caliber, of those likes, who are short-sighted, blinded by worldly riches, cannot look to see that our peoples, we can all live in a world. This is the thing. I think I like this quote very much. Someone said it. It's a group that organizes. They're called All African People's Revolutionary Party. And they say, one of their presenters said, the problem with capitalism is because capitalism lies to us and says that there is not enough in the world for us to enjoy. But the opposite is we actually have more than enough to all live comfortably in this world. Because when this world that we live in, everything in creation has been done for our comfort. So we have more than enough to all live and enjoy. But capitalism puts us in this competitive circus whereby people feel the need to trample on others to have more. So here, the problem starts here when Gaddafi proposes this. So, but the problem really does not start here. So I want to take us back into history. The problem with Gaddafi and the Western world started a long time ago. It started with the rise of Gaddafi. So I'm going to play a short video to take us into a history vote. And the problem they had with Gaddafi, well, we must understand when African nations were getting independence, any leader who had a desire to unify, to solidify, to make Africa economically strong, because Africa is the world's most divided continent, and it's done by design. Berlin Conference, it's right there in front of you, done by design, mastered. Divide and rule is not just something that we say out of entertainment, it's a psychological game. But we're all one people at the end of the day. But we are oneness that's diverse. But we can't even bring that diverse oneness into a solid adjustment to this imperialism. And that's the problem. But regardless of all that, I'm gonna play a video of Gaddafi, a video from Gaddafi rising, and the problem that the Western world had with Gaddafi from the get-go. These problems they had with him when they attacked Libya were not new. They go back in history, and that's not even talked about because they wanted to push their agenda. So let's watch that video, and then I'll come back, and then we'll continue with the program.
When Muammar Gaddafi came to power in Libya in 1969, he used oil as indeed such an opportunity for the greater glory of Africa as well as Islam. He saw himself as political heir to the late President Nasser of Egypt and the leadership of Nasser's three worlds of Islam, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Arabism. Because of his support for the Palestinian fighters, he also inherited from Nasser the Western world's hatred. To the West, Nasser was Hitler. Gaddafi was seen simply as a terrorist. He supported armed resistance against what he regarded as Western imperialism, but in so doing brought down upon himself the revenge of the West. American bombs dropped from the air kill children as surely as terrorist bombs left at an airport.
Civilized nations cannot continue to tolerate, in the name of material gain and self-interest, the murder of innocents. Gaddafi deserves to be treated as a pariah in the world community. We call on our friends in Western Europe and elsewhere to join with us in isolating him.
Gaddafi represents more than a political issue. He personifies a moral one as well. His own actions and the West's reactions bring out the double standards of both camps. Each side protests the rightness of its cause, and emotion gets in the way of understanding. Two supreme ideals seem to have inspired Gaddafi's adventures: to turn Africans and Arabs into masters of their own destiny and to transform them into major actors on the world stage. Gaddafi is another example of how it's not enough just to stop being pawns in the games of the powerful. We must become global players in our own right. More pervasive than military rivalries are economic ones. Here the question of who is player and who is pawn, who is acting and who is acted upon, is being played out all the time.
So as we can see, even with Gaddafi's rise, this Pan-Africanist air about him, this Pan-Africanist ideology that he held was always deemed a threat by the West. So then what happens decades after is that this gentleman right here, Sydney, I don't know how to say his last name, Blumenthal, is a confidant of Hillary Clinton, and we all know Hillary Clinton's emails got leaked. But in some of those leaked emails, the WikiLeaks, there was actually communication back and forth with this gentleman right here, who's a journalist and used to be an aide to Bill Clinton. So this is not surprising where you have journalists in the United States, or it's actually now United, anyway, in that nation. You have journalists and you have a lot of people who work in the media who have not only been linked to helping the ruling class, but also work with agencies such as the CIA. These are things that you can go out and research for yourself. And I remember on some previous show before, I showed you a video of a former CIA agent explaining how journalists are actually fed misinformation, and they spread this information for the benefit of the ruling class. So it's about what the ruling class want. And what the ruling class actually means is people who have their hands on the economics of the world, on the money of the world. As you can remember from previous shows, we have discussed what they call a country can bring its capital, it can grow its capital outside of its own nation. That's why colonization happened. Colonization happened because Britain, nations like Britain, France, and all those countries wanted to grow their capital outside of their nation and have little colonies that were part of their economy, where they could export their produced goods from their nations. So it's about, that's what power manifests into, is who has a hold of the global economy. So this journalist and former aide to Bill Clinton was in those emails and was communicating with Hillary Clinton. So these are some of the things that he said. So he said Gaddafi's government holds 143 tons of gold and a similar amount in silver. This gold was accumulated prior to the current rebellion and was intended to be used to establish a Pan-African currency based on the Libyan golden dinar. In fact, this plan was designed to provide the Francophone African countries with an alternative to the French franc. As we know, that the former French colonies have been fighting the French for the longest time to stop using, as we know, France forces its former colonies to base their economy off of their French franc. And they've been wanting to get away from this. So here we have the leaders of these nations discussing how this is going to affect them economically. And they're looking at what Gaddafi is actually intending to do. I must state that, yes, there was a rebellion in Libya at the time, but that rebellion that was in Libya at the time was easily shut down by the Libyan military. But then the bigger problem came in when NATO actually decided then to go and start throwing bombs and arming more. Not only, they might have not even been people rebelling with a cause, but anyone seeking to cause trouble. This is what they do. This is what they've done in Afghanistan. This is what they did in Iraq. This is what they've done in Syria. This is what they've done everywhere that they have gone. And this is what they've done also in Uganda. They have armed Museveni. You know, when Museveni came into power, him being armed, him getting arms continuously, it's the same mathematics that's being done by these nations. They arm whoever will protect their interests. And in order to protect their interests, the countries must be unrestful, have no peace, have no stability to actually economically build themselves, because that's the only way that they can stay on top. So once these are part of the communications, then what we should know was then the Prime Minister of France was Nicolas Sarkozy. I can't say his last name either. So according to the French intelligence, the quality of the gold and silver that Gaddafi had was valued at more than 7 billion. So here you have an African leader ready to sacrifice for the African nation in a whole and start a currency where African economies can be unified and rebuild themselves. And we must understand that the unification of Africa, not only economically, but in every other aspect, as we collaborate with each other, not only would send down a signal in in terms of our liberation, but will further liberate also other peoples on other worlds, because we have Africans globally everywhere. And if Africa is not manhandled and abused and exploited as it is, this would also bring a halt to exploitation in other places in the world, because we then start to choose how we redistribute our resources, who we plan to redistribute our resources with, and what morals and values they come into the agreements with us in. We then start to have a stronger voice when we start to vote, in terms of we start to be treated fairly when we go to vote in organizations like the United Nations. When the United Nations came up, you had our African leaders there, and they were saying, and you have them arguing for all our votes to matter the same. Why do some nations have veto? But then, regardless of that, there is a reason why Malcolm X was killed, because the more African leaders come together and collaborate for the benefit of the global good, and I hate to use the word global good, but when I say that, I mean for mass to break away from the chain of exploitation. We have to understand that the exploitation starts from our backyard. It has been built on our backyard. The matrix has been built on our backyard and then extended into other regions. So once they discovered that this is what was happening, you had French intelligence officials discover the plan shortly after the current rebellion had begun. And this is one of the factors that influenced why France got involved. So France got involved because of these various reasons. They wanted to gain a greater share of the Libyan oil production. So they never do these things for human rights. Don't lie to yourself that the Western world is going to be involved just for human rights. In Western countries, we still also have violation of human rights in Western countries day in, day and night. In the United States, you're having armed civilians, as long as they're entitled to be policemen, killing people. Like today, I was reading an article about policemen who responded to stolen Pokemon cards and ended up shooting 4 people. One person, Pokemon cards, and ended up, you don't need to use excessive force regardless of the altercation and what it leads into for stolen Pokemon cards. And it ended up in shooting 4 people. One person ended up dying. 2 people have been charged, but the 4th person was not even charged with anything. So why was the 4th person within line of being shot? Due to an arrest, Pokemon cards. So human rights violations have been happening in these Western countries for a long time. Look at how nations built on the enslavement of people and the colonization of people is going to value human rights. We need to wake up from that dream. The French influence in North Africa was also key for the French. Improve internal political in France was key for them. Always know this is to boost their, because Hillary was doing all this because she wanted to look good in light of the upcoming presidential candidacy. That's why Hillary did all of this. So we have to understand that also the French prime minister was doing this to build up his image in France. That is why people who live in Western countries, and I think this is a quote, this is another quote that I've once read and I enjoyed, a quote by Fanon. He said, people living in Western countries have to stop playing the role of the Sleeping Beauty, because it is because of them as well that these things happen globally. Your nation is not rich just because it's rich, whatever you call your nation. The French have to wake up to this reality. The British have to wake up to this reality. And it's even worse for the Canadians, the Americans, and Australians, and people in New Zealand, because those lands are not even your lands. They belong to indigenous people in those areas. Like I live on Musqueam territory. So they need to wake up to this realization. I've lived on Squamish territory. It is not Canadian. It belongs to the Squamish people, Musqueam people. So this was to also help build them and then provide French military with an opportunity to reassert its position in the world. And also it was to address the concern of his advisor over Gaddafi's long-term plans to supplant French as the dominant power in Francophone Africa. So Gaddafi was planning to really take the clothes of the French out of the French colonies, the former French colonies. So here you have a quote from Gaddafi where he said, Obama wants to kill me, to take away the freedom of our country, to take away our free housing, our free medicine, our free education, our free food, and replace it with American-style thievery called capitalism. But all of us in the third world knows what that means. It means corporations run the country, run the world, and people suffer. So here we come to the reality of things. When Gaddafi was killed, when Gaddafi was attacked, we have to understand that regardless of the political situation in the nation, the Libyan people all had access to free housing, free medicine, free food, free housing. Basically, all their basic needs were met. But all this was done so that corporations can come in and run the world. And it's the world we live in today. Because look at, last time we talked about all these shell stations everywhere. We have all this oil in Uganda, but how much of it is actually run by the people, owned by the people? Isn't it corporations coming from France, from the UK, from America that are drilling, refining it and selling it back to us? And it's our oil. We can talk about other things like that are easy to chew on. Let's talk about our fishing industry. It even reaches a point where the government can tell us that we cannot eat certain kinds of fish. But then soon it will also be organized to a point where there's licenses and there's people who can fish and not fish. Fishermen being killed or fisher people being killed because they've crossed into certain sections where they shouldn't be. So it gets to a point where it becomes ridiculous, where corporations start to run the world, and not only the world, but the country and the economy. Because in Uganda, what if it's not owned by a government? By the way, we must understand that yes, even though they take ownership of these things, such as we always talk about how it's all owned by Museveni and his clique, but we must understand that Museveni does not single-handedly, or his people, or people like Janet, they do not wake up overnight and, own one item. That's not how it works. They do not wake up like that. They need capital. And in order to get capital, they need to then have agreements with certain organizations. That's how they do it. So they start to get international corporations and they give them deals. They give them licenses to mine, and then they just share. They get a cut. So all Museveni is a middleman. All Museveni is a middleman. And the one way to do away with an African middleman to our exploitation, we need to cut him off from the bag, the money bag. And that is money coming in from the West, because he's not getting the most profits, the West does. So of course, Gaddafi knew what was coming. So this is a picture, and this is a question that we still have to this day. What happened to the 143 tons of gold and silver worth at least 6 to 7 billions and over 200 million that were recovered by NATO in Libya? If anyone can answer this question from the so-called self-righteous NATO war-mongering people, it will be a sight to see. as we are yet to know what really happened to all this gold, all the silver that was taken away from Libya by NATO when they went to fight a dictator and ended up destabilizing the nation and the country, bombed it. And now what is happening in Libya? We're having modern day, you know, in this era that we live in, slavery is happening at different capacities. You have the prison systems, you have the wage labor systems, but in Libya, the border, you are having African people being traded like we're back 300 centuries for monetary value. In Uganda, Seka will also include, you have the exportation of our people as labor into the Arab states. And you have also the sex trade industry. So the enslavement of people in general is happening at so many variation or different levels. And you have people telling you that slavery ended. But after destabilizing this nation in the name of peace, spreading peace, gold and silver was stolen and is yet to be accredited for. It was taken by NATO, never returned. And recently there was a video of, not recently, this was a few years ago, of the Queen exploring the gold reserves. And we all know none of that gold is hers. All that gold was stolen from African countries. So this goes as an example to show that until we really organize ourselves, and when I say organize ourselves, and why I'm talking to you or to us or to me and not some leaders, it's because the onus is on us to choose our leaders so that they better represent us. It's on us to be able to take our leaders off and replace them with the leaders that will be in for our benefit. Like safeguarding or gatekeeping and keeping ourselves safe is our community responsibility. We cannot hand it to one leader, because this is how we end up in these scenarios. We cannot hand it to, we have to do it collectively as a unit. And we need allies. And we all know for a fact that one group of allies who have our best or similar interests is the African peoples, not only on the continent, but globally. Because we're all looking to liberate ourselves from centuries of not only, it's not been even domination, because it's not even a fair fight, exploitation, genocide. It is genocide. That's what it is. So, we must understand that underneath all of this, it's an economic war. And what does that mean to us? And what does that signal to us? We have to start to understand that we must return the means of production into our hands. We produce it anyways. We work for it anyways. The mines are beneath our feet anyways. It's our responsibility to not only spread knowledge, to not only keep ourselves informed, have an intelligentsia of our own, but to choose and dischoose leaders who do not serve us. The onus is on us. Because at the end of the day, and also we must control where we get our information and what information we deal with, because that is key as well. Because for so many years, I remember when this happened, when Gaddafi was killed, and there were videos of him being hunted through a tunnel and gotten out of that tunnel like a rat. He was killed in total, what's the word? The way how he was killed was so that he's embarrassed, so that he's so that there's a certain level of dehumanization that occurs, so that no one even dares to stand up like he once did. And that was a signal. Not only many of us at that point did not know what was really happening, because you have just Western propaganda telling you they're fighting a dictator, they're fighting a dictator, they're fighting a dictator. And the only people you can really think are dictators, they tell you Stalin is a dictator, Mussolini is a dictator, Hitler is a dictator. But the real level of dictation that happens is when someone dictates what can economically happen, not in your country, but in your house. Because if corporations are running the country, they're getting the most profit. Not everyone is going to get enough profit and money. It's a system of exploitation. For example, let me use a simple example, because many people come out and defend capitalistic principles, but the problem with capitalistic principles is like production doesn't happen for use. Production happens for profit. So when production happens, my favorite example was Kwame Ture gave an example and said, this is the problem with capitalism. They will make a car. They make a car, and the car, you buy it. However, let me not even use an example of a car. Let me use an example. For example, we all know Apple products, iPhones. The moment you have an old model, if you keep on updating it, it is set up to start failing so that you buy the new model. So it's not really bought for use. It's bought, you buy it into the idea so that you can buy the next one. It's the same thing with the car. They will make a car and then they will make a better one than the one that they made. And they knew in that year that the car that they gave you is going to break down anyways. So nothing is done to fulfill just our basic needs, but everything is done to feed the economy with just consumerist desire that people cannot even afford. All day long, advertisements of things you can buy, you can earn, you can have, and all these dreams and aspirations to own this and that. And they know damn well you cannot afford it, because the moment you start to put your money and invest it in there, you are on the losing end, because they're making the profits and you're just working to fulfill your desires and your dreams and your goals of where you should have been or you could be. And you cannot even have a stable currency. Because look at the Ugandan shilling right now. Kenyans are making fun of us, but their currency is not even that strong either. So I don't get the joke, but I can understand because it's embarrassing. The Ugandan shilling really is embarrassing. You can go to Kenya and become a millionaire. No. Sorry, a Kenyan can come to Uganda and really make a world for themselves. What sort of... But that's not even the point, that Kenyan currency is stronger. What we need was a unified African currency. Because once we have that, then all our minerals and how we export, import, then is controlled by our interests. And by our interests, I mean the interests of the people, so that we have free housing, free healthcare, free food, so that no one has to worry about the basic needs, as if already nature or the universe does not provide for those things. We just live in a bubble of capitalism that dictates that people have to work day. This is why it's unfair. People have to work day and night, but we all know some people have already cheated by colonizing, not even cheated, have the rules do not make sense. How they've earned, how capitalist nations have earned their money has been through exploitation and genocide. You cannot make an argument outside of that. If it's not killing indigenous peoples in the nations that now they stand on and say it's their countries, they have gone to other places and killed the indigenous people of those nations. So, as I conclude today's show, we are still wondering where the 143 tons of gold and silver worth $7 billion approximately, and over $200 million recovered by NATO. We all know who's in NATO: France, Germany, the US, the UK. Where has it gone? Where has that money gone? And let this be a wake-up call to us African people to know who is not only who is on our side, but the battle that that has been waged. Because we're not the first ones to come to these realizations. Our ancestors fought to liberate themselves from slavery. Our ancestors fought to liberate themselves from colonization. This is not new. So, in light of this, we should start to understand what African unity actually means. I'm not talking about East African Community Bloc. You do not need a strong East African Community Bloc against Africa. We need a one unified Africa. That's the only way, because we're already so divided on every level. Look at Uganda. We have all these different peoples that literally lines were drawn on a map and then forced to coexist together. We have nations such as, I'll use an example, nations such as in Ghana, you have nations like the Ashanti people just cut across borders. Even in Uganda, you have in the north, you have nations of people like the Acholi, half in Uganda, the other in Southern Sudan. On the border of Uganda with Kenya, on Mount Elgon, you also have people divided across the border. On the border of Uganda and DRC of Congo, you have people divided across the border, all because the Western world decided that, this is where we're drawing the line. So all I'm saying is, what we need is actually serious unity that comes to this level of saying we're going to come up with our own currency to back up our minerals, to actually dictate our imports and exports at this level. This is what got Gaddafi killed. Nothing else got Gaddafi killed. Wanting to start this African currency is what had him killed. Bamutarach, like there was no other reason. Maybe they would have wanted before, but this was a threat to their existence. We must come to that realization. Because let me ask this question: what are we getting out of the East African community other than passports and being promised to learn Swahili? If anyone can answer anything outside of that, and maybe the railways that they're building, but all those railways are being built to take our resources out of the nation, not for our benefit. Out of the Congo, not for our benefit. Why are those resources being taken outside of our borders if it's built for our benefit? So, as we conclude, or as I conclude today's show, I hope that today we have come to a certain realization of things, and we have come to an understanding of, let this be a lesson of how the West lies. Understand that all your favorites from CNN, BBC, like they're all, they're there to control our perspective. They're there to control how we think, how we interact with the world. There's a reason why CNN, BBC, like BBC Africa, man, investing 99 million, not even, was it million or, they invest a huge amount of money. Sorry, I don't have it on my fingertips, just to control how African people are thinking. They want us to think, number one, that we're stupid. They want us to think, number two, that we're poor. They want us to think, and the highest of them all, that we're doomed. That there's no way out for us. We're cursed people with no form, no way to liberate ourselves. And the one of them all, that everything that has happened to us is per our doing. There is truth to that to a certain extent, but also there's a falsification, because it exalts them of their guilt, of their blame, of what they must actually agree to. So let us come to an understanding of where you want to get your information, how much you want to dedicate to actually educating yourself and educating others, because self-education does not mean you educate yourself and sit with that information for your benefit, because it's rather useless if you just sit around with it. Information is meant to be shared. We're meant to build an intelligentsia amongst ourselves and actually pass it down into the next generations. So at the end of the day, I hope this has shed some light. And if you're interested in this topic, go and just search for the WikiLeaks emails from Hillary Clinton. This came off her correspondence with a former friend of Bill Clinton and an advisor to a journalist. I'll go back and show you all his name so that you can go and see, look further into the Sydney Blumenthal, and know that our liberation is our job, is not only our job, but it's our joy, and it's a role that has been passed down. So I want to thank everyone who is here with us here today, people from the previous show, people who have come back and onto this show. And of course, there'll be the next show on this and that. We're going to be coming back to you weekly. And I'm glad that, Zanji can be back and we can do this from time to time every Saturday. And we'll try come a bit earlier. That's the plan, to come in our regular time, which is a little bit earlier, which means 4 p.m. Ugandan time and 3-hour difference. Yeah, 7, is it? I'm not sure. 7 or 6 p.m. UK time. Either way, we'll keep it standard. We'll go by Ugandan times. We'll actually either come 4 p.m. Ugandan time or come 3 p.m. Ugandan time, and then the rest of the timelines can fall into that. Nayenga, thank you everyone who has been on this show. Let's actually start to think about what role we play. Just know that without us, Sophie said it in her previous show, nothing is actually done to you without your consent. The onus is on us. These leaders rise up because of our consent. They become leaders because of our consent. It is when we, the masses, we, the people, you who's working, you who's living in that country, when we shape our countries. And when it comes to Africa, those are our lands. That is our home. That is our backyard. Someone living miles away dictating the life of actually indigenous people's land should not be the role model that we set for ourselves. Because then we find ourselves in a position where our land's being taken away, where our land's being stolen. That's because we ever dared to think of America as an example of what we should be. Because they're just thieves and killers. And also, to make it worse, they're even killing our people there. So I want to thank everyone who is here. Know the facts. Know why Gaddafi was killed. Gaddafi was not killed because he was a dictator. Saddam Hussein was not killed because he had weapons of mass destruction. Osama bin Laden was not just killed because of the terror that he posed to the American people. That is all propaganda that has been made up by these nations to secure their spot in the global dictation of our livelihoods, of where resources go, and for their accumulation. I hope to see you all next Saturday. A blessed good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Yeah, I'm sorry, I do not have a studio line, so we cannot do the whole calling. Maybe in shows to come, we'll have something of that sort, but I don't think so for the Zanji. So we'll see how things go. Nayenga, I appreciate everyone who takes their time to tune into these things. And also I advise for further research, because you never know what might catch your interest, what you might look into. Research it more and also teach the next person, because everything I teach here, I've learned from someone else. I don't just wake up and I know that. I've actually learned from other people. I've researched other people, and then we pass it on. That is our job, to share information and make sure we're all on the same page, because that's how we get unfairly massacred and exploited. So a good evening, a good morning, a good afternoon, and until we meet again.
Bantade, abalangira bantade mirembe. Kenzo mulangira suna tese akama walero. Kano kama, kabuliro yo kwenesiga. Akama, kagamba munago mwesigwa. Kano kama, kabuliro yo kwenesiga. Akama, kagamba munago mwesigwa. Akama. Abaganda twandizukuka ng'obudde butugeddeko, twandikuma lugo ebyaffe babitupako. Suuna waliwo abalyake bangi bentegeddeko, begobanye empologoma bagikutteko. Ebyabulungi bwansi babivanako, ante ekitambo ky'obunanfuusi kyabatuulako. Ayaye omuntu wa wansi gwe bazanyirako, batulimba nti balina ke babala akaddako. Naye abagezigezi ng'omwana Kimbugwe live yababuuka, ekimanya nti batusiba bbako. Keno revolution ikuzukusa bwongo, bali batufera bali batufumba obwongo. Befako bokka, beyagaliza na bokka, bebano bakalya bokka. Bagisula beyambalira masuuti, basiba mu mpate nga bayiwa musimbi. Kye bali babala, gali malya nsimbi ennyonyi bazifula taxi. Kala amazima twabesiga, twabawa omululu abaana bafa bangi basigwa. Amazima abalala bawangaluka, ulira bali ku mawange yo bavuya nsonga. Naye mwate ennaku z'omulyako enze nno manyizi baana, nalime wagonda wuya natera kugenda. Wonyingiriza ennyindo lindako ebinajja, naye bwenfuna federo nawo n'ebinajja. Kano kama, kabuliro yo kwenesiga. Akama, kagamba munago mwesigwa. Kano kama, kabuliro yo kwenesiga. Akama, kagamba munago mwesigwa. Akama, kabaka wafa twetaaga kwanga mujeiko olabe bulende bweya. Munange luno lwoya lwa nnyindo nkubasamboko, waluganda yonna gy'oli kikukwatako. Wamma abaana b'e Bulaaya namwe abaana ba Wakamba, kamba njagala tufuuke ekitole, tulwanire federo lyeko nange ndyeko. Ne kabaka waffe muwenda kyanoonya. Wamma abaana b'engoma n'esakamba, balangira bambejja kakakamba. Mama abaana b'omusuka kakamba, mwe mulimu ekyama, omwava ekyama. Engonge, enfumbe, olugambe, ensenene, ab'ekinyoma ekyama. Mulindwa kyamba bulira mwenna abaana b'engabi, akama mukagabane n'abo abaana b'ekkobe n'enkimwe. Weddira namuŋŋoona oli wakasimba, ab'eddira enkula n'ab'enswaswa. Ab'empologoma bafunye akama, n'abo abaana b'empumu bafunye akama. Abaana b'empeewo kakakama, ab'akatimbuma kakakama. Ab'engonda mwe abaana b'enje akama, komukabulira abo abaana b'ekibe. Ab'embwa namwe ab'ekibe akama, mukakasuka eri mu baana b'envuma. Abaana b'emmamba akama, mutima nenge waliwo akama. Endiga enjovu kakakama, embuzi n'enjobe kakakama. Engere bw'endegeje kakama, obutiko n'akasange kakama. Wamma bekebuka akama mukagabane n'abenjaza. Kuno mulanga basoga bakyoli bagisu, banyoro batoolo banyakole. Ati akama munanga akama, mwenna akama kembagamba federo. Tuve mu munino tukwatire wamu, olutalo lw'okunoonya federo. Katonda yamma